Hello viewers, and welcome to the fourth installment of my series Faith versus Faith, in which I compare and contrast different religious movements with the Jehovah's Witnesses in an effort to find out what, if any, similarities there may be. Joining me today is my good friend and fellow ex-cult member, Chris Shelton. Hello, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing very well, thank you. As you can see, I've just escaped from Los Angeles County Jail.
So I see.
As my t-shirt shows. No, as I was just saying off camera, a viewer very kindly gave me this. And I figured, since I'm doing a video that will very likely lead me to say something nasty about Scientology, and we all know about Scientology's penchant for creating websites with their critics on them, I might as well do my mugshot justice. So that's
awesome.
That's the story behind that. So, Chris, I need to give you a proper introduction. You are the author of Scientology A to Xenu, an insider's guide to what Scientology is all about. I would highly recommend people to check that out on Amazon. You also run the website mncriticalthinking.com, and you have your Chris Shelton YouTube channel. So you're quite busy.
I am. It's a busy schedule.
Indeed. But I'm very grateful that you could join me for this video. We've got a lot to get through, so maybe if we get cracking with what I'm guessing many of my listeners will want to know, which is, what's your background with the Church of Scientology?
Sure. Very simply, I was involved with it directly for 27 years. I grew up around it. When I was about 4 is when my parents got involved. So I was kind of around it growing up in the same way in any kind of religious household, Christian, Muslim, whatever. You just kind of raised with it. But I didn't really take part in it until I was 15 years old. And then once I did start down that road, I didn't stop until I was about 42. At the end of 2012 is when I quit working for the church. I actually worked for the Church of Scientology for 25 of those 27 years, right out of high school. And that was a long time, a lot of experience, a lot of stuff happened during those years. And then in 2013, I sort of separated from the whole thing, got on the internet, found out all the lies and nonsense that I had not been privy to when I was involved with it. There's a lot of, it's hard to appreciate the level of information control that occurs in Scientology. Because we have the internet, everybody can see anything at anytime they want. Not so in the world of Scientology. And so I did not know all kinds of things that I came to learn everybody knows about Scientology. And so then so that was 2013. And once I went down that internet rabbit hole and found out that I'd been living a life of basically a lie, I became pretty upset, and I decided that I would start advocating against such things. And since doing that, I've grown to learn that it's not just Scientology, that the Jehovah's Witnesses, that the Mormons, that these other groups, Bill Gothard's Christian cult. I mean, there's all kinds of destructive cults out there, and that's where my interests have now gone to.
Indeed, and obviously we've had a few conversations already on your channel where we've basically had this conversation. But obviously I'm long overdue getting you on my channel so that we can do the same thing, basically. I obviously, out of all of the religions, probably, if I had to kind of rank religions that I know more about more than others, probably Scientology would be up there. And that's because when I first started waking up, I read Lawrence Wright's Going Clear, on which the documentary, Alex Gibney's documentary, was based. And it blew my mind just how many similarities there are. I mean, and that's strange, because when you look at the actual dogma, the actual belief system behind Scientology, it's poles apart from Jehovah's Witnesses. Would that be right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The thing that you come to learn when you start really digging into this stuff, and you go beyond the beliefs, you know, the Xenu is the least important part about Scientology, and it's the thing everybody blows up about because it's so crazy. But the mechanisms, the control mechanisms, the thought reform techniques that are in Scientology are same as the reform techniques and thought control techniques that exist in the JWs, that exist in any of these destructive cults. And we call them destructive cults because they are destructive. They take a toll on their members. It's not just a group with some odd beliefs. They actually impact your life and impact your mentality and your emotional state in a negative way. And almost anybody who goes into these groups and then manages to escape from them will attest to that. And so that was what I've come to learn over the last few years, and that was in fact what spurred me to reach out to you in the first place and start comparing, you know, and finding out that it's not apples and oranges, that all the things that go on in the Jehovah's Witnesses, yeah, they go on in Scientology too.
Indeed. So I was asked an interesting question recently, so I'm going to ask the same question to you. Yeah. Someone asked me what would be my pitch. It was actually Seth Andrews when I went on his channel. He asked, what would be your pitch if you knocked on my door and you were a Jehovah's Witness? What would your aim be, and what would you be trying to sell me, basically? So if you were able to kind of revert back to your Scientology Chris persona, what would be your pitch to me, and what would you be trying to convince me to do?
Well, I would be okay. Well, the pitch would first off be an effort to actually get you talking to me about you. And what I would want, rather than to preach to you, or rather than trying to tell you all about my dogma, so to speak, or my beliefs, is instead I would be asking you lots of questions about yourself in an effort to get you to tell me, what is it that's ruining your life? What is it that you feel you need to change or improve in order to have the life you want to have? And I would just kind of be poking around about that. Now, if we were talking about Scientology, like if somehow I did a door-to-door or something, you didn't even know who I was, then of course my first, you know, the elevator pitch for it would be, hi, I'm from the Church of Scientology. We're very interested in improving conditions in life and making the world a better place, one person at a time. And so I'd be, you know, I would like to talk to you about how we might, you know, best go about doing that. And this is no effort to try to convert you or make you, you know, change your religious beliefs. Scientology is non-denominational. It's, you know, you can be a Christian or be a JW or whatever and still take advantage of the principles and teachings of Scientology, because it's not, we don't interfere with, you know, any God belief or any belief in, you know, in your current ideas of what's going to happen in the afterlife or anything like that. So I would try to assuage any, you know, concerns about that. And I would actually ask the person as part of this, I would say, what have you heard about Scientology? What have you know, tell me, what do you know, you know, so that I could find out what are the barriers I need to get across, what are the mines that have been laid that I need to set off and get out of the way, so that I can then talk to you, like I was just saying, about, okay, now let's talk about how we can change or improve conditions and change or improve yourself. Before I did that, I'd have to handle any concerns you had about Scientology. So that would be the sequence of events that I would use. And this was actually all documented in Scientology. It's called the dissemination drill. And it's these 4 steps, right? Contact, handle, salvage, and bring to understanding. And these 4 steps are what any Scientologist should be doing when they contact somebody who's not involved in Scientology.
So you're going to handle me, Chris.
That's right. That's right. Well, contact, right? Hello. Handle is actually handling any considerations, issues, or problems you have with Scientology. Salvage is tell me all about yourself and find out what it is that needs to be salvaged about you And then bring to understanding is the step where I say, okay, you have this problem with your kid, or your boss, or whatever it is you tell me. I go, well, guess what? I used to have that exact same problem, and Scientology handled it for me, and it can handle it for you. We've got this course you can do. It's $50, it's nothing. Come on down and let's get you on that.
Now, what's interesting is that I'm seeing commonalities, but I'm also seeing differences. So a commonality is this whole thing of let's make the world a better place. Now, of course, for Jehovah's Witnesses, the way to do that is to destroy all wicked people, and by wicked people I mean everyone who's not a Jehovah's Witness, right. and create this utopia over the bodies of everyone who's been slain.
If you were being totally honest with me from the get-go,
yeah, which you're never going to hear.
Conversation would be like.
You're never going to hear that from a JW, but they still take this approach of, isn't the world bad? Aren't there so many problems? We have an answer to all of that. The difference, I think, and one way in which there is probably more potential for Scientology to be successful, is that it's basically making people feel important. It's saying, you tell me everything about you, and you tell me all of your problems. And in that way, it's kind of like a free, well, not a free therapy session, but it's like a therapy session because it's allowing people to offload, basically, their emotional baggage.
That's right. And it's surprisingly easy to do because people want to talk. They want to be heard. They like talking about themselves. And when you present a facade of your listening and you care and you really want to understand where they're coming from, then it's easy, it's easier than a lot of people think it would be to break through barriers that people have and get them talking and get them, and just through that mechanism alone, get them thinking you care, and therefore you're legit, and therefore what you have to say matters, and leading them down this path to the, entryway into the cult.
Indeed. And another thing that's interesting is I can understand why Scientologists would pitch that they're non-denominational. I get that because as I was saying before, there's no relationship whatsoever in theology between Scientology and most religions, because it's just something completely different. It's more of a, how can I put it? It's more of a way of thinking. But there are teachings. There is, in a way, theology. For example, there are thetans, aren't there?
Oh my God! There's a huge volume of theology when you put it in those terms.
So what happens?
Or dogma.
What happens if you don't go along with that theology?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. You have to. The belief system is not up for question or debate. Now, when you first get in, there's an apparency of freedom of thought and freedom of choice, and you're told from day one. One of the first things you're told is. In Scientology, what's true for you is true. And if it's not true for you, hey, it's cool.
Which sounds fantastic, doesn't it?
What's that?
That sounds fantastic, doesn't it?
Sign me up to that. It's wonderful. Yeah. It's also, sort of relativism when it comes to truth, because truth is not just what's true for you, right? This is one of the things I had to break down after I got out of it. But And it's not like, don't misunderstand me. It's not like all Scientologists have this bizarre relativism going on where they think pink elephants are walking down the street, and if you can't see them, well, that's your problem. They're not that out of touch. But it does set up a bit of one of the landmines that's set up in your thinking process from day one going into Scientology is this idea that, if it's true for you, it's true. And if it's not true for you, it's not true. Well, how is that supposed to work with objective facts like, the gravity in the sky is blue and this sort of thing? And the reason I say that is because Scientology actually presents itself as a series of scientifically discovered principles. It does not present itself as a faith-based religious system. it presents itself as a religious philosophy, an applied religious philosophy, which means that it is religious in nature only because it is dealing with spirituality, immortality, the ultimate, what happens after death, this sort of thing. So it deals with supernatural ideas and concepts, and therefore it's religious in nature, right? But it's not religious in nature in that it's faith-based. So the Scientologists think. Right, it becomes a big quandary when you really start breaking all this stuff down, because it is faith-based, but they don't think it is, and they're told that it's not.
I suppose the other thing as well, and this really kind of sets Scientology apart from, I would say, not all religions, but certainly most religions, and that's the financial side. So, the further along you want, if I want, let's say I want to work my way up in the Jehovah's Witness organization, I'm not going to have to spend any money per se to do that. So witnesses obviously rely on donations, but they're not hunting people down to find out how much they've donated. And in fact, it's quite possible to not donate anything and no one will be the wiser, because people aren't keeping records on you. And you could work your way almost all the way up the ladder to the top in Watchtower without there really being an outlay in terms of money. You're certainly going to expend an awful lot of time and energy, and you're going to be foregoing a lot of other things, but money-wise, it's not really going to impact you. Talk to me about the financial impact of being a Scientologist.
Yeah, this is a huge difference between JWs and Scientology, because at its, if we skip the dogma debate and get down to brass tacks, Scientology is a money-making scam. Period. Just end of story. Everything else that we talk about with Scientology is window dressing. The bottom line is it's about the Benjamins. And you're going to pay from day one of walking into a Church of Scientology, and you're going to get used to paying. First, you're going to buy a book. You're going to buy a course. You're going to buy some introductory counseling, or auditing is what they call it in Scientology, which is one-on-one, sort of psychotherapy, kind of. And you're going to, and these are called donations, but they are fixed rate donations that basically operate on a business model. If you don't pay that money, you're not going to get that service. You can't just walk into a Church of Scientology, go up to their library and sit down and start studying their materials. They're going to go, well, dude, who are you? What are you doing here? What's happening? How can I help you? And they're going to try to direct you into the sales office. And they don't even call it the sales office. They call it the registrar's office, or the reg. And the registrar is the person who signs people up for things. They register them in a register, right? That's where the word comes from.
So it's impossible. What you're saying, just to clarify, it's impossible just to walk. I've seen these buildings, by the way. In fact, when I'm feeling particularly bored, I like to amuse myself by watching some of the official Church of Scientology tour videos of some of these ideal orgs, because I just find the commentary and everything hilarious.
Oh yeah, it's something else.
And what you're telling me is that if I were to go to one of these places, I couldn't just kind of, make myself at home and study the materials and have a run of the place. I would be shepherded into the office, would I?
Absolutely. They're going to try to do a couple things with you. And this is all just introductory stuff. They're going to try to either talk to you, get you to take a personality test, which is another way to get you talking and get you telling, what it is that you need to resolve or handle. Or they will let you wander around in a very specific space, which has a lot of audio-visual displays and videos and explanations of the basics of Scientology, the beliefs, the supposed good works that they're doing around the world with the volunteer ministers and illiteracy and drugs, and the community works that they say that they engage in, which are, there's a lot of balderdash connected with a lot of that, right? So a lot of the stuff you see in those videos is really exaggerated, trumped up, or even just made up out of nothing. But you can wander through that area and watch videos and that sort of thing. But if you want to go anywhere else in the church, yeah, no, No. We're not going to let you just wander around in the building and go see people who are in the course room, or go talk to people who are getting counseling, or go sit in the library. And you're not going to be doing any of that. You got to pay for the privilege of that kind of thing, right? And they are not a charity. Scientology will never just give away services to somebody. So right away you're paying for things, and as you get deeper and deeper in, you're paying more and more for it's a graduated scale that just keeps going up in price. Where your first class might be $50, or you might pay $100 for their communications course, the next course is going to be the Hubbard Qualified Scientologist course, and that's $500, and plus a great big course pack and 3 books you got to buy because you're going to read some of those on the course. And so now you've bumped it up to that. Then you finish that course and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I kind of get what Scientology is all about. And they go, great, well, we got so much more for you, and your next service is $2,500, right? And that's going to be your purification rundown, where you're going to go sit in a sauna for 5 hours and detoxify your body, right? And hopefully not die in the process, because it's pretty dangerous stuff, and so on and so on and so on. So it's a gradual thing that sucks you in deeper and deeper as you go, and you find yourself after 6 months or a year paying for and doing things that you never would have even thought it was possible on the first day you walked in, and when you were just kind of curious what the building was. Or what do these kooky Scientologists think, right? So it's a very incremental approach, but every one of the steps is paid for.
I'm in danger of making a video that makes Jehovah's Witnesses look fantastic at the moment, because what you're describing is just astonishing. So I just want to, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, when you put it so bluntly, that you can get involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses and never pay a dime and go to the highest levels, I sit here incredulous. I'm like, really? You can't, really? You don't have to pay anything? It's such an alien concept to me when it comes to organized religion.
Indeed. Well, I say you won't have to pay anything. You'll have to sit through an awful lot of talks. I mean, not all the time. They'll maybe do a talk every few months where they remind people to donate, and you'll have to have a you'll have to be able to sit through that without it eating away at your conscience that you're not giving anything. But the point is, they're not chasing you down for money in the same way as they do with the Church of Scientology.
Yeah. Well, it's a different, you guys have been around longer. The JWs have been around longer. You guys, come on, Lloyd, you guys,
I take full responsibility for...
But really, you guys have been, the JWs have been around longer, and also, what was I going to say on this? That if I understand it properly, and I don't pretend to fully understand the history of the JWs, but I believe it was founded on a true belief system. It's a real faith. People really do believe this stuff. And the founders of it really believed it. And there's a lot of question as to whether L. Ron Hubbard ever really believed it or not. And there's very good reasons to suspect that he did not ever believe it. There's also other reasons to believe that he might not have believed it as much as he thought he did at the beginning, but he, kind of as he went a little senile, he started fully believing it himself and bought his own bullshit. But I think that's a little bit of a different thing than what the JWs are about.
Yeah, I'm glad that you've brought up L. Ron Hubbard. It segues nicely into what I was going to ask you about, which was the history. I think with the early founders of, I think that the leadership, it's just my opinion, but I think that the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses are first and foremost deluded, and to a certain extent always have been. And with Charles Taze Russell, I mean, he was just a very interesting character, and I really enjoyed researching about him when I was writing my book. But when I kind of study Charles Taze Russell, I see someone who had more money than sense, and was very easily persuaded to believe things by other people, because he was influenced by others when he came up with his teachings. And he was very easily influenced to open his checkbook once he had been convinced of something. And that's basically how the whole thing started. With L. Hubbard, I mean, what a fascinating character he was. Take aside the fact that he ended up starting a religion that caused so much misery in people's lives. You can't argue that he wasn't a prolific writer and had a ton of charisma.
That is very true. Despite being physically unattractive in many ways, well, right? And it's interesting.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, Chris.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. The man, and it's a little hard to explain to people because he's not alive anymore, and to people who have not seen him on film, who have not listened to him, there's thousands, and I mean literally thousands of lectures that he gave over the years that Scientologists listened to.
He was an odd-looking chap. I'll give that to you.
Yeah, he's pockmarked. He has bad teeth. I mean, he was in a pretty bad way. Yet, the charisma thing, and the only reason I'm mentioning this is because the charisma thing was real. One for one, people I knew who knew him or worked with him or spoke with him, one for one, they say, the man had a presence. When he walked in the room, you knew he had walked in the room. And he was domineering. He was overpowering. His force of personality was very, very strong. He was always the life of the party. Even pre-Scientology, he was like that. Very garrulous, very gregarious kind of guy. He was also a pathological liar. And so he would tell tall tales about himself, and some people would believe them, and some people who hung around him long enough started to put two and two together and went, wait a minute, that's not what you said last week, right? And so, this sort of thing would open up. But Hubbard was definitely, without question, he was a writer. He was a writer for the popes. Before and after World War II, he did a lot of writing. A lot of fiction. People call him a sci-fi writer, but really that wasn't what he first started writing. He did adventure, westerns, fantasy. He did nonfiction stuff. He was prolific in a lot of different genres in the pulp field. I don't like his fiction writing personally. I don't like his style, but I know people who do. And from that, after the war, he found himself a bit adrift. He kind of had a bit of a grifter mentality. He would borrow money from people. He was loose with his money. He didn't have a lot of it after he was struggling, and he had been married. He had a couple kids. Totally became a deadbeat dad. Was not interested in them. Hooked up with another woman, married her while still married to this other woman. And just kind of gallivanted around and sort of bounced around from one thing to another until he kind of got it in his head. And I'm still working on research of my own, actually, to try to really narrow down where his ideas came from. But he got involved with the occult, and he started doing some black magic, sex magic. This is Aleister Crowley material, right? The OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientalis, and that was I'm butchering the pronunciations there, but it's the OTO, and he started engaging in some black magic rituals in Pasadena, California, with a guy named Jack Parsons. Those beliefs were things that Hubbard had some personal investment in, according to his private records and papers, pre-Dianetics, pre-Scientology. Then he decides to come up with this psychotherapy, this alternative psychotherapy, which relied heavily on hypnotism, which was something Hubbard knew about. He was a good hypnotist. He was a practiced hypnotist. So he writes this book, Dianetics. He gets some people on board with him who think that he's got the bee's knees, the cat's meow. This is going to be the thing. He ends up writing this book. It does become a bestseller in 1950, Dianetics, Modern Science, Mental Health. And it takes off. It becomes it goes viral for 1950, right? And it becomes this runaway bestseller. He's, gallivanting around the country now with loads of cash because people are just throwing money at him. and he's doing lectures, and he's talking about further research developments in Dianetics. All of this stuff he's just making up off the top of his head for the most part. And after about 2 years, it tanked through gross financial and business mismanagement. Whole thing went bankrupt twice, and because he got a bailout, and then he screwed that guy over. And then he wandered off and started, and in the face of having made medical claims for Dianetics, the FDA was investigating him, the AMA was investigating him for fraudulent medical claims, because he was saying that Dianetics could cure leukemia and cancer and various things. He decided, okay, my way out of this is start a religion. And he started Scientology in 1954, officially incorporated it. And that was all about getting First Amendment protections under freedom of religion in the United States, and no longer being able to be sued or gone after for the medical claims. He could still make the medical claims with his Scientology stuff, but because it was a religion now, they were faith-based claims, and you can't prosecute somebody for religious belief. So that's kind of the basic summary history of how it all started.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating story. I can remember reading Going Clear and thinking, well, there's a movie right here. This character was just outrageous. I can understand why there isn't a movie about it, by the way. But what interests me...
Well, I will say...
Yeah, go on.
I will say this, just on the point you just made. If you haven't seen this movie, there's a movie called The Master.
I've seen it.
That is as close as you're going to get to a movie about L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology.
Yeah, they basically based the character on L. Ron Hubbard, but I watched that after I'd read Going Clear, so I could see that it wasn't L. Ron Hubbard basically. But what fascinates me when you're relating all of this about L. Ron Hubbard, I mean, obviously I'm not going to, but I could do something similar about Watchtower history and all the crazy stuff that happened with Joseph Rutherford and Beth Sarim and all, and Nazis and goodness knows what. Very, very colourful story. But for the most part, most witnesses don't know anything about it. So how much of what you've just said do Scientologists know about?
They don't know much of anything about what I just said. And the reason why is because in the world of Scientology, Hubbard created his own biography, and it was very different from his real biography. And and again, this is all about information control, which is a hallmark of a destructive cult. And so what academics call the hagiography of Hubbard, right, his life story and background and all that, is wildly untrue, right, in terms of what's in Scientology. So Scientologists do not know, for the most part, that Hubbard ever had anything to do with black magic. They do not know that Dianetics went bankrupt twice. They don't know that he was being pursued by the FDA and the AMA for making fraudulent medical claims. They've been told a story of success after success after success, and that Hubbard knew what he was doing from the age of 3 on as the future savior of mankind, right? His entire life story was rewritten. So this is why when I came out of it and went down the internet rabbit hole, it was such a life-changing experience for me, because I saw his actual college transcripts. I saw his war record. I saw the black magic stuff. I mean, in his own writing. I mean, it's not like this is, just made up tales told out of school or something. This is all documented. It's not hard to find, but you got to look for it. And Scientologists do not look for it. They rely on the official church version because that's what they're told is the truth.
I'd like, if possible, for you to tell us a little bit about the hierarchy, and as well to what extent you fit into it. And just to kind of give us some context, I'm going to explain very briefly how the hierarchy works with Jehovah's Witnesses. So, you have the congregations, basically, and there's thousands of congregations dotted all over the place. Those congregations are organized. Those congregations all have elders. The congregations are all organized into circuits, and the circuits all have circuit overseers, and the circuit overseers report to branch offices, and the branch offices essentially report to the governing body. And the governing body is organised into lots of different committees that have responsibility for different areas of the organisation. There's more to it, but that's essentially the hierarchy of Watchtower. How does it work for Scientology, and where were you in that hierarchy?
There are, the lower level churches of Scientology exist at the city level, Denver, Milano, whatever, right? Then you have the SEA organization, SEA organization. That's the elite paramilitary core group of Scientology. And that's a few thousand people. And they run all the management of Scientology, and they run all the upper level services and that sort of thing. And those are the guys who sign the billion-year contracts, by the way, that everybody hears about. So in the hierarchy, you have the lower level churches that your run-of-the-mill Scientologist would be going to. And then you have your higher level churches where the upper level services of Scientology are delivered. And once a person's done with these lower level services, they'll go to the higher level services. And they'll go from staff members are servicing them at the churches to the Sea Org members are servicing them at the higher level churches. And international management-wise, that is located in San Jacinto, California. And that is on a base, the Sea Org base, and there's a bunch of Sea Org members there. And at that level, they're running Scientology all over the world, right? I was a Sea Org member. I fit in at the Western United States level. I was managing churches all over the Western United States, and I was overseeing the delivery of Scientology services all over the Western United States. That was what a good chunk of my Sea Org time was spent doing. I've actually made a whole video answering this question that's almost an hour long because there's all these little details to it. But that's basically the structure.
So basically, Sea Org is essentially like Bethel, I suppose. Well, they say they have Bethel, which is obviously where they have the headquarters, and so they have the branch in London, and they have the headquarters in America. In fact, they have three Bethel complexes in New York. One is like an educational facility, one's the headquarters, and one is the country office for America. But you also, the people who work at Bethel and the people who are the circuit overseers who go out to the different congregations, there's a special name that they work for, and it's called something like the Order of Full-Time Ministers or whatever it's called. I'll try and put the name on here. That would be the Watchtower equivalent of the Sea Org, it sounds like.
Sounds like it, yeah. If they're full-time, if that's all they do, and in the case of the Sea organization, they actually uniform you, and it's a very rigid system that's paramilitary. It's based on the Navy, so there's ranks and ratings and salutes and yes sir, no sir, and even a kind of boot camp that you have to go through. So it's very authoritarian in structure.
Indeed. Now, I'd just like you to tell me a little bit more about how you got out. I know you mentioned it before, but there's a story that I remember watching on one of your videos about you getting internet access. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, about getting into what?
You mentioned on one of your videos about how you managed to get internet access, even though it wasn't allowed.
Yes. Yeah, I was in Twin Cities in Minnesota. I was doing a project out there, opening up one of their new churches, and I was running around in the state of Minnesota and the 5-state region around it, recovering people to Scientology who had come in, done some services, and then left. And I'd go around and I'd knock on the door and I'd say, "Hi, I'm here to talk to you about Scientology." And these were people who had already done it. They already knew about it. Or at least that was the idea. Sometimes that wasn't really fully the case. In order to track people down, I needed to be on the internet to do skip tracing and address finding and phone number lookups and things like that. And while I was doing that and I was looking people up, other Scientology articles and things were coming up on the feed. And so I suddenly was becoming aware of this blog called The Underground Bunker with Tony Ortega. And I was seeing other critical sites to Scientology. And at first I was like, oh, I can't be looking at that. So these articles would come up, and sometimes they would have a headline that would be particularly interesting. And I'd go, oh, what's that? And I'd click on it, and I'd end up on Tony Ortega's blog, or I'd end up somewhere else. And I couldn't help myself. I'm a voracious reader. I'm intensely curious. I always have been. Scientology didn't beat that out of me. And so I would read the article, and suddenly little seeds of doubt were being planted. Because they were asking questions or pointing out things in these articles that were irrefutable. And the more I read, the more I started seeing people I even used to know who'd been kicked out of the church. And I didn't even, and in a couple cases, in one case in particular, one that really hit me between the eyes, there was a guy who had been kicked out of the church that I didn't know had been kicked out of the church. And he was at a very high position. And that blew me away. And I was like, wait a minute, something's wrong here. Something's rotten in Denmark. And that got me asking more questions, which eventually led to me going, I don't think I really should be part of the Sea Org anymore.
But isn't it the case that you weren't really supposed to be? I mean, what I'm fascinated by is the whole aspect of the internet and how it's increasingly being used by people to get access to genuine information about cults. And with Jehovah's Witnesses, how it works is you're basically just told apostates want to lead you off to Satan. They're all lying to you. And if you spend any amount of time on an apostate website, it's like you're drinking poison. And so basically fear is the only thing that's used to stop witnesses from going on the internet. And for the most part, it works. But in your case, I heard you had to buy your own internet access. Is that right?
I did have some very limited internet access because, I was recovering people. And so I was looking their names and addresses and phone numbers and things like that. And that, opened the door for me to be able to see things that were critical of Scientology. And at first I resisted looking at that.
But if you'd have been on the at the Sea Org base, it would have.
I would not have had that access.
No,
absolutely not. They eventually did open up the internet on the base, but it was filtered the same way that it is in China. So there's things you can't look up. You'll never, ever find any reference to Xenu if you're accessing the internet on a Sea Org base.
Do you think that the experience of Scientology is different for a Sea Org member than it is for an ordinary Scientologist?
Absolutely, I know it is. There are people who go in and out of Scientology as public, as regular Joe public, who don't have anywhere near the kind of ordeal or hellacious experience that a Sea Org member has. A Sea Org member's life is one of abuse and slavery. And those are harsh words to use, but they're accurate. I mean, I lived it for 17 years, so I do know what I'm talking about. Yeah, public Scientologists are, they're going to get hit in the wallet over and over and over again. That's how they get hit. And that's mainly their experience with Scientology, unless they start becoming disaffected with it, and then they get disconnected from their family and friends and business associates. That happens, and that's tragic. Sea Org members are living a life of abuse and slavery. And while those are harsh words to use, they're accurate.
When you say abuse, obviously, a lot of the people watching this hopefully will be familiar with, well, number one, the Going Clear documentary, but especially Leah Remini's Aftermath series, which I'm just completely blown away by. For anyone who's been living on the moon for the past year or so and doesn't know about Scientology abuses, what what would you say are the worst ones?
Well, there's a lot of physical abuse. I mean, I was assaulted when I was in, and there's people get locked in rooms. There's, just for weeks on end. I mean, I've seen some pretty nasty stuff as far as actual false imprisonment. And there's a lot of psychological torment and emotional abuse that goes on, a lot of guilt tripping, a lot of victim blaming. It's always your fault. It's never the fault of the church or anybody else if anything goes wrong. So everything, the onus is always on you. And when you're a Sea Org member, that's ramped up 20 times, right? And you're working all the time as a Sea Org. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It is at 8:30 in the morning until 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning job. And I mean, there were a couple stretches where I worked like 4 or 5 days in a row straight. I mean, there was no sleep. So it's a very abusive environment, and things are always run at a very kind of pace. So there's always an emergency going on. There's always some frantic thing happening that demands your urgent attention. So there's never, very rarely are there calms. It's just a lot of storms. You know, that's kind of the lifestyle of a Sea Org member.
And it's astonishing, isn't it, when you look back at how much you're willing to put up with when you're in the thick of it. I mean, I obviously wasn't a Bethelite. I was an elder, so I did see more than the average witness. But what little I saw, I now look back and think, how was I not able to kind of put 2 and 2 together sooner? But I think it's safe to say that what you've just described is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what's going on with Scientology at the moment. And if anyone hasn't seen Leah Remini's series and you're able to check it out, please do. And also, Chris, your website and your YouTube channel, I can't recommend it enough as a resource for people to be able to find out about some of these darker sides of Scientology. So I can only thank you for what you're doing with putting those resources out.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You are definitely my go-to guy on the JWs as well. I am very, very impressed with the body of work you've put together. And, I think both of us are paralleling one another in that I'm not trying to destroy the Church of Scientology. I'm just trying to end the abuses. And I think that's the same mission you're on, right? Because we're not trying to kill people and destroy things. We just want people to live a better life. And the abuses are what need to go away, I
think if it's possible, Chris, I mean, like I say, we've skirted on a few subjects, but we can't do this justice in one video. So hopefully, if it's okay with you, you could join me again at some point in the future, and we can maybe drill a little bit deeper. But for now, I really do appreciate what you've shared with us. Again, I can't recommend your channel enough, and please do keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, Lloyd.
Okay. So, viewers, I hope you found that video interesting. I know I always learn from Chris when he talks about Scientology, and I hope to, again, learn more from him on the channel in the future. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed our conversation. Please don't forget to subscribe to the John Cedars channel for more interview videos like this. And as always, thank you for watching.